Okay, so we have reached a point where we're almost done with our coverage over Batman Knightquest. Now, before we are able to properly move into Night Sin, we still got to cover Knightquest the Search. Now, for me personally, Knightquest the Search was more of like the interlude between Knightquest and Night Sin. Now, with that being said, when it comes to Knightquest, we still have like 4 more chapters to actually cover before we can move on to the Search and then to Night Sin. Now, with that being said, today's video, we're only covering 2 of the last 4 chapters we have to cover. The next video is going to end everything for us when it comes to Knightquest. Now, with that being said, you're going to see a lot of moving pieces being used as a way to wrap up some loose ends that we were seeing in Knightquest, but also kind of setting up things to come for Night Sin. And so with all that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the first chapter of today's video. And that will be Detective Comics 674. Now, as we get into the opening pages for Detective Comics 674, we kind of get the idea the book is trying to remind us that John Paul Valley is almost at the tail end of being that Batman that Gotham does not need technically. And what I mean by that statement is that really at the tail end of Nightfall, but going into Knightquest, we kind of had the idea that John Paul Valley was going to be the more aggressive Batman, way more aggressive than Bruce Wayne was when he was Batman. Less detective work and more of, let's go ahead and just beat a few bad guys to get the answers that I'm looking for different cases. But the problem was, though, for John Paul Valley, he has something inside of him called the system. Now, I'll explain more about the system as we get into the tail end of this video, but just know that the system and also him being more aggressive is kind of leading him down a dark path, a path where he might completely cross the line as a hero. And really, as we went through Knightquest, we had so many examples of him about to cross that line, but only being stopped by other people who were afraid of him of crossing that line. Like, for example, he almost killed off the Joker in the middle of Knightquest. Now, honestly, I feel like that should have been okay. But again, it's the whole idea that he is a hero and he can't cross that line. He's trying to carry on the legacy of Batman where Bruce Wayne had left it at. Now, for Detective Comics issue number 674, it's also special because it's bringing in 2 new characters into the world of Batman comics, and that will be Gun Hawk and Gun Bunny. Now, these 2 characters, they are basically a couple, but they're mercenaries. If you have the money to pay them, they should be able to take out a target for you. And really, in this issue alone, we get a good example of how good they are as snipers because they were able to take out their target 16 miles away. Now, the person they had killed is actually going to be very important for the second half of this first chapter of our video. But just know that this was their first appearance ever in Batman comics. Now, with this guy being murdered at his own birthday party, it does bring in the GCPD. Now, this case, it does get handed over to Harvey Bullock and also Renee Montoya. Now, with that being said, they are informed that the person who had killed this guy off had to use some kind of sniper, but killed him from 16 miles away from a very tall building. Now, for Harvey Bullock, he knows the one person to go to when it comes to the idea of hanging out on the rooftops. He knows he has to reach out to Batman to hopefully have Batman find a sniper person and bring them down for the crimes that they had committed. Now, for Harvey Bullock, he kind of lied when it came to reaching out to John Paul Valley Batman by saying like, hey, listen, I got some information about Bane. But in reality, he doesn't. It's really more him saying like, hey, I need you to handle this. Somebody in Gotham was able to kill a guy with a sniper 16 miles away. I'm going to need you to find this person and bring them down because like, hey, you're a hero, right? You're trying to protect Gotham. Well, guess what? Get to work. But it also kind of shows that for John Paul Valley Batman, he's not really trying to work with Harvey Bullock nor Jim Gordon. He's no longer working with the GCPD like Bruce Wayne did in the past. Now, I want to jump back over to Gun Hawk and Gun Bunny. And the reason why, because you had those two characters, after they were able to complete their last contract, they had actually went back home that's far away from Gotham. But one night you had Gun Hawk just reading a magazine. And while reading that magazine, he hears that there's going to be a gun convention back in Gotham City. And apparently in that gun convention, they're going to show off some new weapon that the military said no to, but only because the government said no. But apparently it's going to be very powerful. And so for Gun Hawk, his whole idea is to go back to Gotham to hopefully get that gun because he loves how great it looks and how powerful it truly is. And so they agree to go back to Gotham. Now, I want to jump back over to Gotham City and pick up with John Paul Valley being Batman because you have him trying to do some detective work to figure out who in the world killed that guy from earlier. Now, for John Paul, he knew that if somebody had used a sniper that far away, they are a mercenary, which means somebody had to pay that mercenary to kill off that guy. And so for Batman, he figured out it had to be a guy known as Arnold Heckert. Now, for Arnold, he owns a waste management company, but what he was doing was illegal dumping. And apparently the guy who got killed off was going to expose him to the entire world of what he was doing. And so what you had Arnold did next was threw a birthday party, but he also hired the mercenaries, Gun Hawk and Gun Bunny, to kill off that guy before he would be able to expose Arnold for what he was doing. Again, illegal dumping. And so with that information, you now have Batman being able to kind of figure out who was the mercenary who killed that guy off earlier, because Arnold told him it's a guy known as Gun Hawk. Now, it does not take John Paul Valley that long to figure out who this Gun Hawk person is, because once he does go back over to the Bat computer and does his research, he was able to learn who Gun Hawk is, but also to see if Gun Hawk was back in Gotham. And just by pure luck, well, Gun Hawk and Gun Bunny are back in Gotham for that gun convention. Now, the rest of the first chapter of today's video is really more of John Paul Valley being Batman and going after the Gun Hawk and Gun Bunny duo. Now, while trying to go after them, let's not forget, they're at this gun convention. So at first, it's just Gun Hawk and Gun Bunny trying to shoot down Batman. But by the tail end of the actual battle, you have other people who were at that convention beginning to use their guns as well. And so one of their bullets had actually hit Gun Bunny. And so you have Gun Hawk grab Gun Bunny to get the heck out of there, hoping that his girlfriend will actually survive. Now, with that being said, for John Paul Valley Batman, he actually hangs back. And the reason why, because his armor suit was shot up a lot thanks to Gun Hawk and other people at that gun convention. So the way the book kind of ends for the first chapter of today's video, we're kind of left to believe in the possibility that John Paul Valley is dead. His whole entire armor suit was shot up like no other. Now, as we get into Batman issue number 508, it actually does pick up moments after the ending of the last chapter where we do get confirmation that Batman is A-okay. But for Batman, he's very upset because once again, he allowed another villain to get away. Gun Hawk. Now, the other person he allowed to get away is a character known as Abattoir. Now, we had actually talked about this character in the past in our earlier parts of our coverage over Knightquest. Now, remember, when it comes to Abattoir, he was like this C-list character that DC was trying to make into at least a B-list character. Now, for Abattoir, he was this guy who was going around killing off different members of his family. And the reason why, because he believed that his entire family was actually evil and they deserved to, well, die. And so we kept seeing him going after different members of his family, but at this point in Knightquest, he was always trying to go after one family member, Graham. Now, in our last video for Knightquest, he was able to get to Graham and actually take him as a hostage and put Graham in some kind of torturing machine. And really, the kind of torturing machine that Graham is in is completely messed up. So you have Graham currently laying on top of a bed of nails. Now, here's the thing. He is tied down the bed of nails, but every hour, one weight is going to drop on top of him, pushing him down on the nail. So every single hour, he gets heavier and heavier and continues to get pushed deeper and deeper into the nails until he officially dies. And it's kind of like, okay, can John Paul Valley Batman save this man in time before he is officially killed off by his crazy cousin, Abattoir? Now, I want to jump over to Robin. Now, remember, around this time in DC Comics, Tim Drake was the Robin for Batman, or really for Bruce Wayne Batman, not John Paul Valley Batman. The reason why, because to John Paul Valley, he did not see the actual purpose of having a sidekick. But for Robin, he hated the idea of just leaving Gotham for John Paul Valley to watch over because he knew that John Paul was kind of, well, losing it. Now, for Tim, he would always try to sneak into the Batcave when John Paul was away. Now, for Tim, he's also trying to find Abattoir. And so for Tim Drake, he was able to kind of realize that in the actual family of Abattoir, there were different properties that was bought out by the family. And so for Robin, he was able to do some detective work and realize which of the properties is Abattoir is actually hiding out at. And so you have Tim leave and hoping to get there in time before John Paul Valley gets there. Now, the rest of this chapter is really more of Tim Drake being able to arrive at the scene just in time to see John Paul Valley chasing down Abattoir. Now, their battle goes all over the place, but then it does end up inside a factory where you actually have both John Paul Valley and Abattoir kind of fighting over a furnace. Now, here's the thing. By the end of their battle, you actually have Abattoir hanging for his life right over the actual furnace. Now, you would think that John Paul Valley has not officially crossed that line yet, and he would try to save the life of Abattoir, even though this man deserves to actually die. But while you have Tim walk into the room, he realized that there's something wrong with John Paul Valley, like something has officially taken over him. And then Tim remembers that for John Paul Valley, he has the system installed in his mind. Now, we had talked about the system before. The system was something programmed into the mind of John Paul Valley when he was becoming the next Azrael, the avenging angel for the Order of St. Dumas. In matter of fact, when he was becoming the new Azrael, Bruce Wayne found him and said, hey, listen, don't go there. Come back to Gotham with me and become the next Batman down the road. And so ever since then, you had John Paul Valley trying his best to leave behind the Order of St. Dumas. But like I said, they have programmed the system inside his mind. Now, when it comes to the system, it's actually a program in his mind that kind of helps him be ready for different kinds of situations, to give him the fighting skills he needs to get out of those tight situations. Now, when it came to John Paul Valley, he was become the next Azrael to replace his father, who was the previous Azrael. Now, when it came to the system, we had many examples of the system kind of changing in his mind. And let me explain, because over time, he would begin to see St. Dumas, the actual, not demon, sorry, but the actual being that the Order of St. Dumas actually praises. Now, here's the thing. When it came to St. Dumas, they told Azrael, you need to lead Gotham into a better version of itself, to lead it into the light. You have now picked up the mantle of the Dark Knight, and it's time for you to lead this dark city into the light. Now, over time, when it came to the system, he also began to see his father. Now, when it came to his father, he was all like, no, you have to follow the actual Order of St. Dumas and be this avenging angel. And so, as we get into the ending of today's video, when it comes to the system, he's now seeing both his father and also, well, St. Dumas. Now, again, for St. Dumas, it's more of, hey, do not kill that guy off. arrest him and hand him over to the cops and continue your work in trying to lead this dark city into the light. But for his father, his dad is saying, no, you need to kill this guy because if you don't, he'll just come back and kill again. Why not go ahead and end this crazy life cycle in Gotham City? And so by the time you have John Paul come back to, well, for Abattoir, he had failed inside that furnace. And so he had officially died. And when he had failed in, well, Tim Drake was there. And so for Tim, it's kind of like, oh my God, did John Paul just cross that line and allow that man to die? Now, the ending of this book, it kind of tells us two things. The first is that because you have Batman go back to the Batcave, he was not able to find Graham. And so, unfortunately, Graham dies by the hands of that torturing machine. Now, for John Paul Valley, when he gets back to the Batcave, this is the sign that the man's mind is completely broken. Because thanks to the system, but also seeing his father and also St. Dumas, the man trying to figure out which path to actually take, it breaks his mind. This is the point where we can officially say the man has lost his sanity. And the book ends on that note right there. And this leads us into the final two chapters of Batman Knightquest. With that being said, guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time in the next comic book video. Later.